Hello, and welcome to video number 2 for Learning ATM Forms of Notation. Today we're going to be looking at data flow diagrams. Similar to the objectives in our previous video on information flow diagrams, today we need to be able to understand how organizations use data flow diagrams to explain systems, data, and information. We also need to be able to interpret information that's presented in the data flow diagram and what that actually means. And finally, we'll go through some examples together where we draw some data flow diagrams for set scenarios. Firstly, let's consider what a data flow diagram is. Now, these will show us who or where the data has come from and how that data flows around the system diagram. We can then work out how the data that has been inputted can be processed, and once processed, how it can be stored, whether that's digitally or manually. And who or where the data from the system is output to. So where does the data actually end up? When you're in the exam, you may be asked to draw a top level or level 0 data flow diagram or a level 1 diagram. We will go through some examples of these in the next few slides. When drawing a data flow diagram, it is critical you use the correct symbols, as you have been taught in lessons. The first symbol is an entity. This image is used to represent a person or an organization who uses the data. The second symbol is to represent a process where something is carried out to the data itself. And once that process has been completed, the third image shows where it can be stored. Now again, this could be either manual, for example stored in a book written by a person, or digitally, like you save your files on a computer. And the last symbol, again, is an arrow, not a line. If you only draw a line, the examiner does not know which way the data is flowing. It's important when drawing a process or a data store, you label them with the number that they are in the diagram, whether that's process number 1, process number 2, or process number 3 to be carried out. You will notice when we look at our first simple data flow diagram that there is no processes. When drawing a level 0 DFD, you only show the entity and the data flow. We'll look at this example now for a cash machine. We have one entity, or one person, the user, and we have another entity, the organization of the bank. You can see that the data input into the cash machine is the PIN and the card details by the user and how much money they'd like to withdraw. You can see the data that is then given back to the user from the machine is the account balance to let them know how much they have remaining. And that data also goes to the bank, so the bank knows who is withdrawing and if they are an authorized person. And they can confirm that the cash is available back to the cash machine before it is released. This means I can't withdraw £1,000 from the machine if I only have £100 left in my account. Let's take a look and try to apply the theory we've covered so far on a second simple data flow diagram. In this example, we have a fast food restaurant where the customer uses a touchscreen to place their order. Once they've placed their order, the amount that they need to pay is displayed on the screen and the order is sent to the kitchen. What I'd like to do is pause the video and try to see if you can identify which part of the diagram is the process and which part is the entities, and see if you can also label what the arrows are going in and out show. So let's go through it. Hopefully you identified that the food being ordered is the process, because the customer would enter the data and that order would be completed in the processing part. The entities would be the customer and the kitchen, as they are two groups of people. The customer would place the order or the items that they would like to eat into the food ordering process, and they will be told how much to pay back from the ordering process. And the food that they have ordered will be sent from the food order process to the kitchen, so they cook the correct food. We are now going to expand on this fast food ordering system data flow diagram. We have 5 bullet points to add to the diagram, and we'll do this one by one. Let's make a start. So, in the first bullet point, we were told that the orders will be stored in the order file. So if we know they're being stored in an order file, you've seen I can now draw my data flow diagram to the next stage, where I have the ordered food process also going into a file, which we know as the order file from the question set, and I've done it as D1 for digitally. This means the computer will record the order itself without a member of staff having to store it. In the second part, we have the quantities ordered. So we are being told what the data is, so how many quantities have been ordered of the product, by the customer will be subtracted from a stock file. So we now know, for example, if I was to order 2 chicken burgers, the 2 pieces of chicken would be deducted from the stock file. So if they had 10 pieces of chicken at the start, they will now have 8 left. As you can see, I've drawn from my food ordered process to a new file of stock, and I've called this digital 2 because it's the second process to be carried out after the file has been completed and saved into the order file. We are then told that reports will be created from these 2 files. So we know we're using both the order file and the stock file, and these reports will be sent to a manager. Now, because the manager is a person, we know that's going to be an entity. So as you can see, I've got an arrow going from my stock file and my order file, going to a new process where the data will be used to generate reports. So reports will be created on what items are sold the best, or how many stock items are left for reordering from their supplier. And these reports that are generated will then go to the manager. So the manager can then use them to make decisions. Manager, so we know the entity we're going to use here, will then order new stock from a supplier. Now again, a supplier is a business or organization, so therefore we now know we need a 4th entity, and the process will be of ordering new stock. So from using the question given, we now know where the entity is going from, where the entity is going to, and the process that's going carried out. So from the manager, I've got to the supplier a process of ordering new stock. I have numbered that number 3 as it's the 3rd process that we have used in this diagram. And you'll notice that my arrows have been labelled with the stock order, so I know how many items I'm having to buy from my supplier to top my company back up. And in the final part of our diagram, we are updating our stock file with the new quantities of stock that we've purchased from our supplier. This would mean if I had 8 chicken pieces remaining and I ordered another 10, my stock file would inform me that I've got 18 chicken pieces left to sell to customers. We have now completed a level 1 data flow diagram. This is because we've gone into more explicit detail regarding the processes that we have used to explain the scenario. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to model a few example questions so you can practice drawing those and understand them a bit further. If you use the information shown on your screen, you can pause this video and attempt to draw out what you believe would be the data flow diagram. Remember to go step 1 to step 7 in order and draw out each part separately. And please remember to use the symbols that are shown at the bottom that you must use to get full marks in the exam. Once you're happy, continue the video and we will talk through it. In step 1, we have been informed that a doctor enters key patient details to find out about the appointment. So the doctor is an entity, as it is a person, and the process is to find out about the information for the patient that has requested the appointment. You will see that my arrow has the details given in step 1, such as their name, address, and date of birth. Let's look at step 2. In step 2, we are told that the patient's medical history is retrieved from a patient database. So this means that once a doctor has asked for the information is found from a file that is stored about the patients. So I've now got the medical history coming from a file store, which is the patient file, going back to the doctor through their request process. In step 3, we are informed that the doctor will examine the patient, which means that they will check what happens when the patient turns up to their room. They will then record the examination details, which we will use later in our drawing. So as you can see, once the patient has come to the appointment and the request has been made, in my part 3, the doctor examines the patient and the process will be to write down and to record what has happened in the visit of the appointment. We are then informed in step 4 that key details such as the date of the appointment will be stored and recorded in the patient's database. So in the patient's database, the file, we have from process number 2, the key details such as the date and the reason for the visit stored into the patient file that we drew earlier. In step 5, we are informed that when a patient is given any medication by the doctor, key details will be written to a prescription file. This means it is recorded on what medication was offered to what patient. So you can see from the details of the visit being recorded in the process number 2, any medication is then stored into my digital 2 file called prescription. In step 6, we are then told that a prescription is prepared and sent to the EPS. So for it to be prepared, that is a process of somebody actually putting the medication together for the customer to collect. So from my prescription file, where it is stored on how many medications or aspirin is given to a patient, process number 3 is where those 2 aspirins will be collected and bagged up with the name of the person to collect it and their date of birth and other key details, so we know who comes to collect it is the right person. And in our final step, we are told that the prescription is then sent to the EPS. And again, the EPS is a person or organisation, therefore we represent this in our diagram as an entity, which you can see follows my prepare prescription process number 3. Okay, let's take a look at an example exam question. In this, we are told that we have a person called Dave, who is a traffic policeman. And when he is on the road, he has a license plate reader, which allows him to scan the cars that drive past to identify who they are and if they are a valid driver. They use the police database for this key information. So, in the first part of my DFD, we have the entity, so the person Dave with his license plate scanner, and the data going in is the scan of the car registration, so we know what car we are actually reading. And in our first process, we compare the scan of the car registration plate with the police database. We can then see that once it is scanned, the information will be sent from the DVLA database about the car. And other key information such as insurance, MOT, and if the car is stolen or not will be shown on the screen in the police car for Dave to be able to make decisions. So if we continue drawing our diagram, we had the car being scanned through its registration number. The police database will then contact the DVLA database file with the car registration being used to identify the car. Once they have found this car in their DVLA database, the car information will go back to the police database for it to be used. This information will allow Dave in his car to be identified if the car should be stopped or should be allowed to continue on its journey. We have now completed our first data flow diagram for an exam question. In our second example, we are going to use a more familiar scenario. Imagine you are attempting to log in to your Amazon account. The computer system will check the ID of the person logging in alongside their password on a customer file that they have stored for who is an authorized user. So you've got your customer, who is a person, so an entity. They log into the Amazon website to check their login details in process number 1. They supply their ID and password to the system for it to allow them to recognize. Now, once they've submitted that, process is complete, a message is displayed on the customer screen if the ID is invalid. So if they ever use the wrong password, the actual customer file will tell them they are incorrect. So if I put my username and password into the actual process, the customer file will check what username I entered, what password I entered, and it will return whether it is approved or it is invalid. And if the login details are incorrect, it will tell me that it's invalid. But if the details are correct, then it will welcome me to the website. So from the login details process, I will either be welcomed to the Amazon account or I will be asked to try again. Let's draw a level 0 data flow diagram for a scenario you may be familiar with. In this, we are told that a customer orders an item. When the customer is ordering the item, they use a credit card to pay for their goods. And this credit card will be checked with the credit card company. The payment is either approved or rejected by the credit card company. So depending on how much funds they have or their balance, the credit card company may say, no, you can't afford this new item, or yes, we are happy to pay for it because we know you will pay us back. And finally, a confirmation of the order is sent to the customer with a delivery date, so they know when the product will arrive, or if the credit card company reject the payment, they will be notified that, so they are aware that the transaction has not gone through. So we know that we have a customer entity and the credit card company entity. We know our process is the order being placed. See if you can pause the video and work out the data that would flow amongst this diagram. Okay, so the customer would place the order. Once they have placed the order would actually contact the credit card company, so the company would find out can they pay for the item that they're trying to order, who would check to see the balance, say yep or no, and then the company who is taking the order from the customer would feed back and say your order has been accepted and it will arrive on Saturday, or the credit card company declined your request, you need to pay with an alternative method. Hopefully you got that correct. In our final example, we're going to go from a level 0 data flow diagram into a more detailed level 1 version. Let's understand the scenario. We have a company called Doncaster Drive who sell cars through their website. We know that there are 4 stages to this data flow diagram. In the first one, we have a customer who submits the offer for the car on the website. We then have the offer being checked by the sales team. So how much have they offered for the car in question? The offer can either be accepted or rejected, depending on if they feel it is a good price or they have offered too little. And then the customer will be told about the decision from the sales team. So they'll be told to either collect the car on a certain date because their offer has been accepted, or they will receive rejection notice to say that they need to pay more for the car. So we've got our entities which is the customer and the sales team. We also have Doncaster Drive, who sells the car through their website, shown as the entity in the middle. See if you can label the arrows for the data that is flowing on this system. We'll come together in a few seconds. So, hopefully, for first stage, you had the customer submitting the offer to Doncaster Drive. In part 2, we had the offer then being sent to the sales team, so we get told what car, what price has been offered by the customer, so the sales team can analyse that and make a decision. In part 3, the offer was either approved or rejected, so Doncaster Drive know now to tell the customer whether they can collect it on a certain time or day, or that their offer has been rejected. We're now going to look at this level 0 data flow diagram to expand it into further detail to become level 1. Let's expand our previous data flow diagram from a level 0 to a level 1 by adding more detailed context. When the sales team approves an offer or an order, they will then clean the car. So the car is ready to be collected in a good condition. That is a process because someone has to carry that task out. And the customer, when they come to collect the car, they must also pay for the car before they can drive it away. And again, this is a process where something has to happen. So I've now drawn my process 2 and process 3 to show that an action is going to take place. The car sale will then be stored in a sales database. So it will be recorded in a car database, the sale that has occurred. And the payment made by the customer will be stored in a finance database. So we know if they paid by cash or cheque, so if they come for a refund in a few days' time, we can give them their money back in the correct format. So I've now drawn my databases for my files and my processes for the scenario. I now just need to link them all up to show the flow of the data. So the offer's been accepted and the car is going to be sold in the car database. So I've said which car is being sold into my database. I've done that digitally, so it's automatically done by a computer, so D1, rather than manually in a book by a person instead of M1. Once the car's been recorded as sold, the car details will be sent to the team for them to clean it, so they clean the correct car. Once cleaned in process 2, the customer will be told that the car is ready to collect and ready for payment to be taken in process number 3. The customer will then arrive to the store, they will make payment and receive a receipt, so they have got a recording of their payment, and the money that is paid will be stored in the finance database, and this is digital 2 because storing the car sale was digital 1. We have now covered a number of examples for data flow diagrams.